Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're examining the disappearance of a man whose name became intertwined with one of India's most controversial terrorism investigations, a witness who vanished, leaving behind more questions than answers.
You know, it's a uniquely modern kind of terror, really.
Yeah.
Because human beings, we have physical mass.
Yeah.
We leave digital footprints. We have daily routines. We generate like mountains of paperwork.
Right. Constantly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when someone just vanishes without a single trace, they don't evaporate. They're erased. And the systems that are powerful enough to erase a person, well, they almost always leave a faint bureaucratic paper trail.
Right. Like a missing signature or something.
Yeah, unfiled report, a delayed transfer. And that paper trail is what we really have to walk through today.
An erasure with a paper trail. I mean, I keep thinking about the sheer terrifying randomness of this whole thing. I want to welcome you, the listener, to today's examination because we are looking at a story that could literally happen to anyone. The person at the center of this erasure is Dilip Patidar.
Just a normal guy, really.
Literally just a normal guy. He was 28 years old, living in Indore, which is in the state of Madhya Pradesh. He wasn't some international fugitive. He wasn't a bomb maker or, a political mastermind. His fatal mistake was basically just signing a lease.
Yeah, that was it.
He was renting a room from a man named Ramchandra Kalsangra, who also went by the name Ramji. And Ramji just happened to be a primary suspect in the 2008 Malegaon bombing. Imagine you are called in to answer a few questions about your landlord and you never see your family again. How does a seemingly routine witness inquiry turn into an 18-year legal ghost story?
Well, Dilip Patidar was essentially collateral damage to a much larger, much darker narrative.
Right.
His identity in the official records just became completely subsumed by his landlord's alleged crimes. He was pulled into this massive investigative machinery simply because of his physical proximity to a suspect.
Just because of the apartment.
Exactly. And, in these high-stakes terrorism cases, investigators often treat these peripheral figures less like human beings and more like extractable resources.
Like tools.
Yeah, they're levers to pull when you can't get your hands on the main target.
So to understand why the authorities were pulling those levers so desperately, we really need to look at the environment at the time. We have to rewind to 2008. And if you were following global news back then, you probably remember that 2008 was just a remarkably volatile, incredibly violent year across India.
Oh, it was an absolute pressure cooker?
Yeah.
There was this massive surge of terror attacks that left the entire nation on a knife edge. I mean, Jaipur, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Delhi, all these major urban centers were being hit with coordinated bombings.
Right, just one after another.
Right. And the intelligence agencies and the local police forces, they were operating under an unimaginable amount of pressure. The public is terrified, the media is demanding arrests like yesterday, and the federal government is coming down hard on local police chiefs demanding results.
Which sort of sets the stage for September 29, 2008. Explosions rock Western India, and the most devastating one happens in Malegaon, a city in Maharashtra. A bomb hidden on a Hero Honda motorcycle detonates near a hotel at a really crowded area called Bhikkhu Chowk.
Yeah.
6 people are killed, over 100 are injured. And then almost simultaneously, there's another blast in Madasa, Gujarat, which tragically kills a 15-year-old boy.
And we have to talk about the timing of these blasts, because it is absolutely critical if we want to understand the mechanics of the investigation that followed.
Okay, lay it out for us.
So these explosions happened on the eve of Navratri, which is a major, very vibrant Hindu festival. But at the exact same time, it was also the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
Oh, wow. So everything is overlapping.
Everything. In Modasa, the blast happened right near a mosque, while special Ramadan prayers were actively being offered. So you have this highly charged religious atmosphere. The potential for immediate, massive communal violence is just through the roof.
Right. The police aren't just investigating a crime scene.
Exactly. They're not just investigating a murder. They are desperately trying to prevent a city from burning itself to the ground in religious riots.
And stepping into that absolute nightmare scenario is the Maharashtra Anti-Terrorism Squad, or the ATS. At the time, they were led by Hemant Karkar, who was a very prominent officer, and he actually tragically died later during the 2008 Mumbai attacks. But at this moment, the ATS is scrambling.
Scrambling is the word.
Yeah, they're looking for the perpetrators, the bomb makers, the financiers, and they start following a trail that leads them to a massive paradigm shift in the investigation.
Right, because traditionally in that era, investigations into bombings of this specific nature almost immediately focused on Islamic extremist groups.
That was the standard playbook.
It was. But the ATS, they started following the forensic evidence and the intelligence chatter, and they pivoted. They actually began looking at right-wing Hindu extremist groups, specifically an organization called Abhinav Horat.
Which was a huge deal, right?
It was a seismic shift in Indian law enforcement and politics.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that had really happened before on this scale. And one of the key suspects they identified in this whole new web of evidence was Ramchandra Kalsangra, Dilip Patidar's landlord.
But Kalsangra is a ghost. The ATS, they just can't find him anywhere, so they look at his property records, they see he owns a place in Indore, and sitting in that place is Dilip.
Right.
Which brings us to November 2008. The ATS sends a team from Maharashtra all the way to Indore in Madhya Pradesh. This team is led by an officer named Rajendra Goul, who was an inspector then, and another inspector named Ramesh Moore.
Yeah.
According to the official timeline, they approached Dilip on November 10th. And on November 11th, they put him in a vehicle and transport him across state lines back to Mumbai.
And I really want to highlight the mechanics of that interstate transfer, because it's where the procedural cracks really begin to show.
How so?
Well, when police from one state operate in another state, there's a very strict protocol. You don't just grab someone and drive off into the night.
Like a movie.
Right, exactly. You are supposed to inform the local jurisdiction, which in this case is the Indore police, log the movement in the station diary, and create an official written record of the detention. But Dilip's family maintains the ATS didn't maintain any proper official records of his detention in Indore.
So they're saying he was basically taken off the books.
Exactly. They argue he just vanished into an undocumented void.
But, the ATS comes back with a very different story. They claim they brought Dilip to Mumbai, interrogated him, and he was totally cooperative. In fact, the ATS stated that Dilip agreed to give a formal confessional statement to a magistrate under Section 164 of the Criminal Procedure Code.
And we really need to translate what that law actually means for the listener, because it is the absolute linchpin of the ATS's defense here.
Go ahead. What is Section 164?
So in the Indian legal system, a statement given directly to a police officer generally isn't admissible as hard evidence in court.
Why is that?
Because of the historical risk of coercion or torture. The courts know that people will say anything if they're beaten. But a Section 164 statement is totally different. It is recorded by a judicial magistrate.
Like a judge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the magistrate is legally required to ensure the person is speaking voluntarily, and there are absolutely no police officers allowed in the room.
Okay, that makes sense.
So once a witness gives a 164 statement, it is locked in. It's considered incredibly strong evidentiary material. It's incredibly hard for the defense to shake it later.
Wait, so if he is supposedly willing to give a confession directly to a judge, isn't that game over for the defense? I mean, that's the holy grail for investigators in a terrorism case.
It is the absolute holy grail, which is what makes the ATS's explanation for what happened next so baffling. The ATS claims that they took Dilip to the magistrate, but because Dilip did not have any formal identity proof on him, no voter ID, no driving license, nothing else, the magistrate refused to record the statement.
I mean, I guess you can't just have a random person confess to your crime without legally verifying who they actually are.
Sure, that part makes perfect sense on the magistrate's part. They have to follow protocol.
Okay, but here's the part of the ATS's story where I really have to stop and push back because this just sounds completely absurd to me.
Yeah.
The ATS claims that because he lacked ID, they just released him. They say that on November 18th, they supposedly told him, go back home to Indore, grab your documents, and take the train back to Mumbai. Hold on. If you have a crucial witness in a national terrorism investigation, do you really just let them walk out the door alone to fetch an ID card without an escort? I mean, explain to me how that actually works in reality.
It doesn't. It defines every single standard operating procedure in law enforcement.
It has to, right?
Think about the pure logistics of witness protection. If a witness is that valuable, and, frankly, potentially in massive danger from the very terrorists he is about to testify against, You do not let him out of your sight for a single second.
Not a chance.
The mechanics of solving that missing ID problem are so simple. You send an ATS officer to his house in Indore to retrieve the documents.
Right. You just send a guy.
Or you fax a request to the local Indore police to go to his house, secure the documents, and courier them over.
Yeah.
You keep the witness in a secure safe house.
Yeah.
You certainly do not wave goodbye at the train station and just hope he returns next week.
Exactly. It's ridiculous. And surprise, surprise, Dilip Patidar never made it home. He never showed up with his documents. He just vanished. And his family is sitting back in Indore, absolutely frantic. The days are ticking by. So they file a habeas corpus petition right away in 2008.
Right, a habeas corpus petition. It literally translates to produce the body. It is the most fundamental legal mechanism that citizens have against the state.
It's basically saying, show us you have him.
Exactly. It's a direct demand to the courts to force the government to bring a detained person before a judge to prove they are being held lawfully. It is the ultimate legal cry for help when someone disappears into a black hole of state custody.
But that cry for help just echoes. Nothing happens. The family goes to the Madhya Pradesh High Court. The local police look into it a bit, but obviously they get nowhere against an elite counterterrorism unit from a completely different state.
Local cops can't really interrogate the ATS.
Right. So in 2010, the High Court escalates it. They say, okay, we are ordering the Central Bureau of Investigation, the CBI, to take over. Now, if you are the family, this sounds like a massive victory. The CBI is the premier federal investigating agency in India. It's a huge deal.
On paper, yes, it is a massive victory. But in practice, it turns out to be the beginning of an absolute masterclass in bureaucratic stalling.
Yeah.
The High Court was very aggressive initially, actually.
Yeah.
At one point in 2011, they literally ordered the CBI to finish the probe within 2 months.
2 months, that's fast.
Very fast. But the CBI just repeatedly came back to the court, expressing an, quote, inability to trace him.
How does a premier federal agency fail to trace a guy whose last known location was literally inside a police headquarters? Like, he didn't disappear in the woods, he was in their building.
Because of bureaucratic inertia and these massive legal firewalls, you have to remember the CBI wasn't just looking for Dilip. To find Dilip, they had to investigate the ATS officers who last saw him.
Cops investigating cops.
Exactly. And the CBI eventually hit a brick wall. They filed closure reports in 2014 and again in 2016.
And what does that mean, practically?
A closure report essentially tells the court, look, we've exhausted all our leads. There's no sufficient evidence to proceed to trial, so just let us close the file.
Just give up.
Basically. However, the CBI did indict the 2 former ATS officers, Gould and Moore. And the special court actually rejected those closure reports and issued arrest warrants for the officers in 2016.
So you see those warrants issued and you think, finally, after 8 long years, we are going to get a trial. We're going to get these officers on the stand under oath and find out what happened. But then the system deploys its ultimate weapon. In April 2018, the Madhya Pradesh High Court set aside the trial. They relied on Section 197 of the Criminal Procedure Code. We need to look at the mechanics of this law. What exactly is Section 197 and how did it essentially erase this trial?
So Section 197 is a provision that's designed to protect public servants from malicious, frivolous, or politically motivated prosecution while they're just doing their jobs.
Okay, that sounds reasonable in theory.
In theory, yes. It states that if a public servant is accused of an offense that was committed while they were acting in the discharge of their official duty, they cannot be prosecuted in a court without the prior sanction, meaning the explicit written permission of the government.
So it essentially acts as a bureaucratic firewall. You can have all the evidence in the world that a virus is destroying the computer, but Section 197 means you need the virus's permission to run the antivirus software.
That is a perfect functional analogy, honestly. The court looked at the timeline of the ATS officers and said, look, Gould and Moore didn't just go rogue. They were ordered by their superiors to go to Indore. They supposedly informed the local Indore police. They took Dilip to Mumbai and produced him before senior ATS officers. All of this was done under the umbrella of official orders.
So because there were orders, it's covered.
Exactly. Therefore, the court ruled they were acting in official duty.
And because the court labeled it an official duty, the CBI needed the Maharashtra government to explicitly grant sanction to prosecute their own police officers.
Right. And if the government refuses to sign that piece of paper, The trial cannot legally proceed. The law creates this almost impenetrable barrier. If the state decides it wants to protect its own institutions, it simply withholds the signature.
And the Maharashtra government withheld the sanction. They just didn't sign it. The Patidar family was so desperate, they even appealed directly to the chief minister of Maharashtra in May 2016, literally begging for that permission to prosecute. But the doors just stayed completely shut. It's this terrifying catch-22. The state investigates the state, finds the state might have done something incredibly wrong, but requires the state's permission to punish the state.
It is the absolute definition of institutional rot.
Yeah.
The system successfully investigated itself into a permanent state of plausible deniability. And, while this legal stalemate dragged on endlessly in the courts, the internet and media were absolutely exploding with theories. And a lot of that was driven by some of the most sensational whistleblower claims in Indian legal history.
Okay, let's examine the custodial disappearance bombshell, because this is really where the story shifts from bureaucratic negligence to allegations of an active cinematic-level cover-up.
It really does.
Enter a man named Mehboob Mujawar. He was an assistant police inspector, a suspended API from the Maharashtra ATS. Years after Dilip vanished, Mujawar comes forward with statements that just completely shatter the official "he went home to get his ID" narrative. He tells the investigating agencies and the media that Dilip Patidar was killed in police custody.
It is a devastating allegation, just brutal. But Mujawar didn't stop at Dilip.
No, he didn't.
He made a claim so morbid, so logistically horrifying, that it just consumed the internet commentary around this case for years. He claimed that two of the primary missing suspects in the Malegaon blast, Sandeep Dange and Dilip's landlord, Ramji Kalsangra, were actually secretly killed by ATS officers too.
And here's the mechanical detail that caught everyone's attention.
Right. Mujawar alleged that their bodies were disposed of by mingling them among the unclaimed victims of the November 2008 Mumbai terror attacks.
Wait, the 26/11 attacks. The attacks where armed gunmen besieged Mumbai for days, leaving over 160 people dead.
Yes, the very same.
Mujawar is suggesting that rogue ATS officers used the cover of one of the greatest national tragedies in Indian history to quietly dispose of bodies. I mean, how would that even work mechanically? How do you just slip a body into a terror attack aftermath?
Well, if you look at the mechanics of mass casualty events, the theory, while utterly horrifying it, relies on the real chaos of disaster victim identification.
Okay.
During 26/11, the hospitals and morgues in Mumbai were completely overwhelmed. You had dozens and dozens of victims, massive confusion, overlapping jurisdictions of local police, the military, federal agencies.
It was total chaos.
Total chaos. In that specific window, bodies are being moved, tagged, and sometimes left unclaimed for days while families are searching. Mujawar's theory suggests that officers with high-level clearance could theoretically slip a body into that overwhelming bureaucratic overload, tag it as an unidentified victim of the terror attack, and eventually just let it get cremated or buried by the state.
God. The timeline makes it undeniably plausible, too. I mean, the 26/11 attacks happened roughly a week after Dilip Patidar supposedly walked out of the ATS office.
The timing lines up perfectly.
But I really have to challenge Mujawar's credibility here, because if you look at his background, he is not some pristine, untouchable witness. He was suspended. He was facing his own severe criminal charges, cases under the Arms Act, allegations of criminal intimidation and extortion. Is this a whistleblower exposing a horrific cover-up, or a suspended officer facing his own criminal charges, extortion, and Arms Act violations, throwing smoke bombs to save himself? I mean, if you are an officer facing serious jail time, isn't tossing a grenade into a national security investigation a pretty convenient way to deflect a pension or maybe angle for a plea deal?
That is exactly the counter-argument utilized by the prosecution and by all of his detractors.
It makes sense to ask that.
Absolutely. When a highly compromised individual makes these explosive claims, their credibility is immediately suspect. You really have to ask if this is a brave truth teller or a desperate man burning the house down on his way out.
Right.
However, in the world of deep state investigations, whistleblowers rarely have clean hands.
That's a good point.
They're usually the ones who are deep inside the mud to begin with. You don't get this kind of information if you're a choir boy. And his claims resonated with the public because the official ATS story, that whole missing ID card excuse, was already so unbelievably flimsy.
That's already a joke.
Exactly. When the official truth is absurd, public belief naturally gravitates toward the conspiracy.
And Mujawwar's claims didn't just stay in the realm of police brutality. He crossed the line into allegations of massive political conspiracy. He alleged that his boss at the time, a high-ranking officer named Parambir Singh, ordered him to arrest Mohan Bhagwat. For context for you listening, Mohan Bhagwat is the chief of the RSS, which is one of the most powerful Hindu nationalist organizations in India. Mujawwar claimed this order was given specifically to manufacture a saffron terror narrative, and that when he refused to carry out this illegal arrest, he was punished with those false extortion cases.
Now, before we explore this specific angle,
Yeah.
we need to be incredibly clear about our parameters here.
Yes, definitely.
The term saffron terror was used heavily in political discourse at the time to refer to acts of violence motivated by Hindu nationalism. And the Malegaon bombings case became the absolute epicenter of a massive, bitter political and ideological war in India.
Yes, and we want to state this unequivocally to you listening. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints here. We are not taking sides between the left-wing or right-wing narratives. Our goal is strictly to examine the source material and report on the intense public debate that surrounded this case, because that debate completely swallowed Dilip Patidar's disappearance.
Absolutely. It totally eclipsed him. The internet and the political sphere just latched on to these dual, fiercely opposed narratives.
Right.
On one side, you had politicians and commentators arguing that the entire investigation was a political frame-up by the government in power at the time. They pointed to Mujawwar's claims as absolute proof that the ATS was heavily politicized, taking direct orders from political bosses to target right-wing groups and manufacture conspiracy.
People like Shankar Singh were heavily involved in this discourse, right?
Yes. Politicians were publicly accusing state governments of manipulating the police force to protect certain ideologies and actively persecute others.
And on the flip side, you had those who pointed to the ATS's original charge sheets. They argued that the right-wing groups were definitively involved in the bombings and that the massive public pushback against the ATS was actually a coordinated effort by powerful political forces to protect their own, discredit the police, and derail a completely legitimate terrorism investigation.
And right in the middle of this clash of titans, right in the crossfire of this massive ideological war, is Dilip Patidar,
Just a guy who rented a room.
a 28-year-old tenant.
Yeah.
A regular citizen. He became a ghost, entirely overshadowed by the noise of national politics. When people talked about his disappearance on internet forums or news panels, they weren't really talking about finding Dilip anymore.
No, they were using him.
Exactly. They were using his disappearance as ammunition for their preferred political narrative.
If you believed the ATS was corrupt, Patidar's death in custody proved it. If you believed the ATS was doing its job against terrorists, maybe Patidar was an accomplice who fled. Which perfectly brings us to the other major theories floating around Reddit and Indian legal forums. Let's look at the voluntary disappearance theory.
Okay, let's unpack that.
There is a whole segment of commentators who speculate that Dilip wasn't killed by the police at all. They theorize that he was so terrified of the actual terrorists, perhaps his landlord, Kalsangra, that he realized cooperating with the police was a death sentence. So the moment he got out of that ATS office, he ran. He changed his name, left his family behind, and chose to vanish to stay alive.
It's a theory that surfaces in almost every missing witness case, honestly.
Because people do run.
Right, because the instinct for self-preservation is incredibly strong. But if we analyze the actual mechanics of running, the voluntary flight theory has massive gaping holes in this context.
Like,
First, his family has consistently and vehemently rejected this. They maintain he loved them and would never abandon them to face this nightmare alone. Second, and much more importantly, it just doesn't align with the findings of the federal agencies that eventually reviewed the case.
right, because later on, the National Investigation Agency, the NIA, which is India's premier counterterrorism task force, they took over the Malegaon probe, and their internal review cast serious aspersions on the ATS. An NIA official was actually quoted saying that Patidar was picked up to extract a fake confession.
Yes.
They alleged the ATS wanted to force him to falsely implicate his landlord and other accused.
And this is a crucial pivot in the whole narrative. If the NIA believed the ATS was actively trying to coerce a fake confession, it strongly points toward witness coercion and a catastrophic failure of witness protection rather than voluntary flight.
It totally shifts the motive.
Exactly. Let's look at the psychology of forced confessions. If you are a civilian isolated in another state, under immense duress from elite anti-terror authorities who are demanding you sign a false document implicating mass murderers.
It's terrifying.
It is. And your odds of walking out of that facility freely, hopping on a train, and successfully starting a new life completely off the grid are vanishingly small. The state has all your information. The terrorists allegedly know who you are. Voluntary flight requires resources, money, and connections that Dilip simply did not have.
So if we strip away all the internet noise, all the political shouting,
Yeah.
what do we actually know for sure? Let's synthesize the verified facts versus the allegations. We know the Maharashtra ATS physically took him into custody in November 2008.
Yes, verified.
We know the High Court ordered the CBI to find him, and over a decade of investigation yielded absolutely nothing. We know the NIA eventually reviewed the ATS's work and found it so fundamentally flawed that they dropped major charges. And we know the Maharashtra government flat out refused to grant sanction to prosecute the officers involved.
Those are the hard, undeniable facts of the case. The allegations, which are incredibly compelling but remain unproven in a court of law, are the specific cinematic details of his custodial death, the disposal of bodies in the 2611 morgues, and the high-level political masterminds pulling the strings.
But honestly, the verified facts alone are enough to paint a terrifying picture of institutional failure.
Was it enough?
And that picture was finally officially framed by the courts just recently. We have to examine the explosive verdict that came down on July 31st, 2025. After 17 years of trials, appeals, and political maneuvering, the special NIA court delivered its final judgment on the 2008 Malegaon blasts, and the verdict was a total acquittal. All 7 accused were acquitted due to a lack of cogent and reliable evidence.
But the judge didn't just acquit them. He systematically dismantled the original ATS investigation piece by piece.
It was brutal.
The list of procedural lapses read out in court is literally a catalog of investigative malpractice. We're talking about missing original documents. And they found that the chassis and engine numbers on the bomb-laden motorcycle had actually been tampered with.
Hold on, explain to me how a police unit tampers with a motorcycle engine number in a major terrorism case. Like, how does that physically happen?
Well, engine and chassis numbers are stamped deeply into the metal at the factory. It's not just a sticker. To tamper with them, you physically have to grind the solid metal down, or use acid etching to alter the digits, or literally punch new numbers over the old ones.
That sounds really obvious.
It usually is. Forensic metallurgists can almost always detect this because the original stamping forcefully alters the molecular structure of the metal deep below the surface. Even if you file it smooth, the shadow of the old number remains in the metal's grain. The court found that these numbers were manipulated to falsely link the bike to specific suspects.
The court also cited massive chain of custody violations, right?
Yes. So the chain of custody is the chronological documentation that records the sequence of custody, control, transfer, and analysis of physical evidence.
Like an evidence locker sign-out sheet.
Exactly. If a piece of evidence, like, say, a swab of explosives is collected at a crime scene, there must be an unbroken paper trail of exactly who held it, where it was stored, and who tested it at every single moment. If there is even one gap, the defense can rightfully argue the evidence was planted or contaminated. And in this case, the chain was repeatedly broken.
And it gets worse. The ATS allegedly withheld scientific tests and narco-analysis reports that were favorable to the accused. Can you explain what a narco-analysis report is? Because honestly, that sounds like science fiction.
It does sound like a movie. Narcoanalysis involves administering a drug, usually sodium pentothal, which is often called truth serum, to a subject to lower their inhibitions. The theory is that it makes them more likely to divulge hidden information.
Does it actually work?
It is highly controversial, and the Supreme Court of India actually ruled that forced narcoanalysis is completely unconstitutional. But in 2008, it was still being utilized in these high-stakes cases. The fact that the ATS allegedly conducted these tests got results that pointed away from their chosen suspects and then just buried those reports.
Yeah.
It is a massive violation of the judicial process.
And perhaps the most damning part of the 2025 verdict, the court noted that there was suspicion the ATS had actually planted traces of RDX explosive at the residences of the accused to frame them. RDX is a military-grade explosive. It isn't something you just buy at a hardware store.
Not at all.
Finding it in a civilian setting is a massive red flag. If the court suspects the investigators planted military explosives to secure a conviction, the entire foundation of the state's case collapses.
It was a systemic teardown of the state's case.
Hmm.
And crucially for our subject today, the court explicitly acknowledged the severe abuse of witnesses.
Right.
The judge noted that testimonies like that of a witness named Manil Nyojoshi Rao were obtained through torture, illegal detention, and threats. Because of this coercion, over 37 prosecution witnesses turned hostile during the trial.
Let's define what a hostile witness is mechanically in a courtroom setting.
A hostile witness is someone who is called by the prosecution to support their case, but once they're on the stand under oath, they turn around and testify against the prosecution's narrative.
They flip on them.
Yes. In this case, 37 people got on the stand, looked at the judge, and essentially said, the ATS forced me to sign that statement. They threatened me. They tortured me. What I said before is a lie. When 37 witnesses turn hostile, your case doesn't just fall apart. It reveals a methodology of terror utilized by the investigators themselves.
And this circles us right back to the sheer tragedy of Dilip Patidar. He was one of those witnesses. He was in that exact same ATS custody, under that exact same pressure to produce a confession. The only difference is those 37 witnesses survived to retract their statements in court. Dilip didn't.
And that is where the tragedy compounds into a truly terrifying realization about the justice system. If you trace the bureaucratic wiring of this case, it's just maddening.
It's exhausting.
Think about the judicial directives here. A high court orders a premier federal agency, the CBI, to investigate a missing person. The CBI fails for over a decade. Then the Home Ministry, literally the highest internal security authority in the country, orders the CBI to transfer the Patidar disappearance case to the NIA, who is now handling the main blast case.
And what does the CBI do? They refuse. They express an inability to transfer it, claiming it's a court-directed investigation, which forces the NIA to go back to the High Court to beg for jurisdiction. It's just acronyms, ATS, CBI, NIA, fighting over jurisdiction and legal technicalities while a family sits in the living room and indoor waiting for their son to come home. It reveals a deeply fractured system. It is a labyrinth where accountability goes to die.
And while these agencies battle over paperwork, we must explore the psychological toll of what human rights organizations clinically call an enforced disappearance.
Yeah.
When a person is murdered and a body is found, it is horrific. It is an absolute tragedy. But it is finite. The family has a physical reality to grieve. They have a funeral. They have a place to mourn. They have an ending, however terrible.
I think about this all the time. When a person is murdered, there is grief. But when a person is erased by the very institutions meant to protect them, it doesn't just destroy a family, it rots the public's trust in justice. The judge said suspicion cannot replace legal proof, but what happens when the investigators themselves are the suspects? How do you wake up every day for 18 years wondering if your brother, your son, is in a black site somewhere?
You can't.
Wondering if he's dead, wondering if you should keep his room exactly the way he left it. The ambiguity is a form of psychological torture inflicted by the state. You were just frozen in time.
And that rot spreads outward to the public. In the 2025 verdict, the judge wisely stated, suspicion cannot replace legal proof. He was talking about convicting the accused terrorists, but what happens when the investigators themselves are the suspects?
It breaks everything.
The public is left with nothing but suspicion. We suspect the ATS killed him. We suspect the government covered it up. But because of Section 197, because of missing files, because of burned documents, we will never have legal proof. The system is perfectly designed to ensure the public never gets an answer.
Which brings us to the core tragedy of this whole examination. Dilip Patidar was a man defined in the history books only by who he rented his house to. His entire existence was boiled down to a footnote in someone else's terrorism trial. The ultimate mystery here isn't just what happened in that Mumbai interrogation room in November 2008. The real mystery is why the entire architecture of justice, the courts, the federal agencies, the state government, collectively allowed the answers to be permanently buried under red tape.
And here's a final, lingering thought to consider. Somewhere in that architecture, the truth actually exists. Somewhere in a labyrinth of sealed files, or in the memories of a few retired officers living out their pensions, or behind the locked doors where government sanctions are debated and denied. The exact final moments of Dilip Patidar are known. The truth isn't missing. It is simply held by a select few who know that the system is built to ensure they never, ever have to speak it.
Next time, we head to the remote hills of Oklahoma, where an entire family vanished after leaving behind a truck, thousands of dollars in cash, and one of America's strangest modern disappearance mysteries.